So our boy JVS, you either know him as King Noble Natty or as the peak representation of fake natty villainy. He just came out with a video, 15 ways that steroid users cope. And I laughed when I saw it. I even left a comment like, without having watched this yet, I know I'm guilty of like 8 or 9 of these. And it got me thinking, like, what does it mean to cope? It means that you're doing something you know you shouldn't be doing, or you're suffering all of these like deleterious effects, but you've still got this script, this narrative that you printed out, you read it, you committed it to memory, and you're just reciting these lines. It's like a domestic abuse victim, just like in the fetal position in the shower, just shaking and crying, saying, he loves me, he still loves me. So I thought this was a good opportunity to be transparent. Maybe give a bit of a retrospective. So with that being said, let's cover some of Jeff's copes.
Natural lifters are afraid of taking steroids. Both Runvus and Revival have used this, and it kind of paints steroid usage as this bold adventure into the unknown where other people are just, they're terrified of it, but I'll do it. Like, y'all scared to do it, I'll do it, that kind of thing.
I'm in danger!
And if you switch the steroids for another drug, what if some addict in the corner, like, shooting up, oh yeah, these guys, they don't have the balls to do what I do.
So number 1, starting off hot. This is absolutely true, and this is something I directly experienced with the first people I ever met that were really openly about gear. One of them, who may or may not have been a co-owner of my gym at one point, absolutely treated gear as if it was something that defined him because it was risky, because it was extreme. I remember him multiple times saying, this is big boy shit. This is the same type of guy that was walking around the LA Fit Expo and told Scott Mendelson to his face, yeah, I'm going for the California state bench record. I mean, layers of fuckery, bragging about a state powerlifting record that you haven't even got yet. Saying it directly to the face of one of the best bench pressers that has ever walked the face of the planet. Do you understand why I hate powerlifters? And it's not just powerlifters. People always try to leverage that aura of danger to kind of bolster themselves. And as much as we kind of look back fondly on like the Rich Pianas of the world, those types of figures were very guilty of making that a popular approach to using gear. I've always pushed back against the hardcore counterculture aesthetic that people tried to assign to lifting. Lifting is a fucking hobby. I enjoy doing it. I like when other people do it. I like talking about it. I get a lot out of it. But the people that signed up because they wanted it to be part of their identity, that dominated the powerlifting scene from all the local gyms in Southern California at the time. Everybody had to have hardcore names. It was the people covered in tattoos that thought they were Rich Piana leaving humanity behind. And that was very appealing to a lot of people that were brand fucking new. So even at the time, I wanted to put the kibosh on that Cobra Kai bullshit. I did not want to be the gym that was just arbitrarily hardcore. Even though, yes, we might have incorporated too many skulls in our barbell logo, but I was big on people paying their dues. That's what I tried to apply to my gym. So when people came in off the wrong foot looking for this to validate their cheap, low information idea of what that lifting identity was, and when they were trying to poison the well by taking a bunch of shortcuts that was going to result in them being on gear, looking like shit, performing like shit, not really knowing anything about the sport when all is said and done, I didn't want that being associated with my gym. So yeah, I know I get a lot of flack because I'm the guy that's on gear and I'm open about it and I'm transparent about it. However, I'm also telling the masses, the bottom of the iceberg, which is most of lifting culture, which is people that are relatively young, relatively new, and may or may not be here in a few years, that they shouldn't jump on gear. I have no problems in saying that because we're not the same. And if that triggers you, then I'm sorry, you're the problem. If bull riding suddenly became very popular and you had an epidemic of teenagers, literal kids, as soon as they could, just getting out, hopping on the bull, getting on some 2-ton moosey with a fucking anger problem that has a rope strapped around its balls and hoping that they don't get kicked off, that would be a problem worth addressing. You wouldn't look at the veteran bull rider and be like, well, you're doing it. Risk is dependent on experience, and risk only makes sense if you've established that the juice is worth the squeeze. Part of that is being around long enough to navigate it appropriately, which newbies don't. Kids are impulsive fucking idiots.
Number 4, no one is natural anyway. Nothing is natural. And this is where they're trying to move the goalposts. Oh, but you take creatine. You take protein powder. You use gym equipment that is artificial. And you might say, no one makes these arguments. I've seen these arguments. They're trying to make it a slippery slope. Well, you know, if you're taking protein powder, you're taking your creatine gummies, you're taking some other supplements, peptides, pro hormones, TRT, tren. I tend to draw a line in the sand and just go based on WNBF regulations, WADA regulations, World Anti-Doping Agency, because yeah, it can be a slippery slope.
So this is a hard problem and becomes kind of a philosophical problem of labels and of putting boundaries around things that are very hard to define, because if you have the incentive to do so, and if you look closely enough, you can find the cracks in any definition and make it to where kind of anything goes. That's the slippery slope to nihilism. Now, the funny thing is it works both ways, because while people can use this to justify their gear use, this is also a feature of the natty community that can be kind of insufferable. I remember specifically working at LA Fitness, having a conversation with one of the smallest people there. He was an MMA fighter, decently athletic dude, but he was skin and bones, hanging around a bunch of guys that like to squat, bench, and deadlift for fun. And I remember everybody was talking about supplements, and unironically, he was not referencing the meme. Somebody brought up creatine, and he said, no, I prefer to be completely natural. Just like you can use that slippery slope to kind of unravel all standards and make anything go, similarly, people can use it to reinforce their puritanism. And this is the narcissism of small differences. No matter what, when you have a group of people and they're making comparisons against everybody else, you can always move the goalposts. You can always measure smaller and smaller differences until you're left in this one little corner that's especially reserved for God's special little soldier. Now, this problem with definitions leads people to kind of go off vibes. So they might think it's really principled. Instead, they're really just kind of going off what they feel is going to be labeled by the people around them as natty or not natty. And this can also cause some problems. I've literally worked with people, guys that had natural test levels under 100. They were technically eligible to compete in the fucking Olympics in the women's division, and they would not get treatment because of the stigma around testosterone use. And Jeff himself says that he sticks to these guidelines for natural bodybuilding, and that's fine. You know, it's like, this is a organization that holds the standard. You got to have some standard, might as well be that. But most people are familiar with the absolute clusterfuck that occurred in the Olympics and some other organizations that really tried to emphasize their natty status, where they similarly got really militant over silly, stupid shit because they had a hard time of defining exactly where that line was. We've heard of people having medals stripped because they took Sudafed the night before because they had a cold. Caffeine is literally labeled in some organizations as a performance-enhancing drug because it's a drug and it enhances your performance. This has actually been proven. Yes, you on caffeine before a heavy gym session will literally perform better than you without. Does that change your stance on it? Is it different because more people do it? Is it related to the risk? How much risk makes it acceptable? These are harder questions than you might actually think. But as with all silly philosophical questions where you can niche down, get into the weeds, and feel like you've made no progress, it helps to pull the lens out. I think we can comfortably say that there is a stark difference between pumping yourself full of pro-hormones, trenbolone, testosterone. We have ways of categorizing these things, and we know the risk that comes with them. And whether or not you want to use the word natural or something else, we can label it such that people are inclined to be a little bit more careful before they make the jump into regularly using them.
Number 8, I hit my genetic natural muscular potential anyway, and then I hopped on. Now, if this is less than 10 years when they're saying this, I know they're full of shit, right? But I lifted for 5 years and I got my natty gains. Like, you got all of them in 5 years? No, I've seen 3 years. I've seen even 1 to 2 years. You know, after a year, you're basically done. That is just silly. And the vast majority of people taking steroids, they are doing so to get their natural gains. They're getting them faster, more easily, sooner, sure, but they could have gotten those gains naturally if they just waited and lifted naturally.
Now, this is a big one because this is an example of the students writing the syllabus. It's a problem with lifting culture that people get in on their own, and there isn't really a set hierarchy where they're often getting checked by the veterans, and they go into these little internet forums where it's a bunch of low-level lifters giving advice to other low-level lifters, and they create their culture, their narratives based around that. It's Nietzsche's genealogy of morals. Not a single person on God's green earth has any business commenting on what their genetic predispositions are or their potential limit is until they've clocked minimum a decade of not just in and out of the gym, but serious training, grinding away with the intent of getting better. There are many people who have meteoric rises, and we're inclined to think that the person that got super jacked at 18, 19 years old is an example of primogenetics, and if I don't have that, well, it must mean I'm disadvantaged. However, there are a lot of people who are legends who grinded their way to the top. Zydrunas kept improving his deadlift and overhead throughout the entirety of his career. I gave an example of the world's best 90 kilo bench presser, who despite being on a bunch of gear, obviously, still progressed over a 15-year period to hit his highest number. Now, it's not just that it takes a lot of time to hit that number, that there has to be a lot of problem solving going on while you're doing it, because gains follow a sigmoidal curve. You see exponential growth when you do something new. It's a novel stimulus, your body adapts, and then things level out. Whether you know it or not, if you start growing again, it's because you introduced some novel stimulus or because you started increasing the amount of stress that you were experiencing in your workouts. Now, since most people have their training as vibes or whatever they saw on Instagram most recently, and they jump around like crazy, a lot of time in the gym, it still doesn't even mean that your training was worth a good goddamn. It is the safest assumption if you're not growing that your training sucks and there's something else that you can do. And unless you're really committed to getting your hands in and figuring it the fuck out, you're never actually going to realize it. So I can safely say that 100% of people that are making this argument, they cite their genetic limit as a reason for going on gear, are absolutely full of shit. And as Jeff says here, these are also the same people that are going to have underwhelming growth on steroids because they are not the magic IFBB Pro potion that many people think that it is. So now they get the benefit of being ranked against other enhanced lifters, namely the greatest that have ever lived, and you're going to get a sea of comments saying, you went on gear to look like that? You went on gear for a class 1 total? This is through and through just sheer impulsivity. And if you have been at it a couple years and you're getting the itch, just know that the more you delay that switch, the more gains you get. It's widely thought to be the case that if you're strong and you go on, if you're muscular and you go on, gains are much higher. However, if you're relatively underdeveloped, the effect you get from the gear doesn't persist. It doesn't work that way with any drug in the world. Diminished returns set in unless you keep ramping the dose up. So why would you want that when you're benching 185? You would want that when you're benching 300 to jump you up to that next level. I've heard Dave Tate say multiple times, it's a card you can flip once because the effect of gear tends to be more immediate, and sustained rapid growth requires harsher compounds and higher doses. So seriously, guys, hold off. If you want to do it at all, the longer you wait, better the gains are, and you'll know more about fucking training. You'll actually learn something about how your body adapts, because there's nothing worse than being stuck on a cycle, things aren't moving forward, and you can't separate effective training protocols that have actually caused you to grow from what the gear is just doing. It's a recipe for disaster.
Oh, you can't do anything naturally anyway. You can't look impressive naturally. And this is often fueled by these types of videos where someone is standing under really poor conditions. They just ate a meal. They're not flexing. They're maybe at the end of a bulk, and so they look really smooth everywhere. And they say, okay, well, I don't want to look like this if this is what is possible naturally. But when they do see a top natural physique under good conditions, oh, well, that's not natural. So when you show them what is possible naturally, they just don't believe it because standards seem to be getting not higher and higher and higher for a lot of people, but lower and lower and lower.
And that ties into this one, number 9. You can't do anything naturally. That's the black pill. Again, I can't stand the black pill because it is derived directly from the impulsive, I want it now, consumer culture, low-level lifters that don't want to defer to people that have actually been around the block, trained for a long time, because they must all be on steroids anyways. Or what if you're somebody like me who's coached hundreds of people over 2 decades? I know conclusively what the average effect you can expect over a variety of natural lifters from all walks of life because I have that firsthand experience. The people that think you can't do anything naturally anyways are just permanently set to have an excuse for when they don't do the thing that they told everybody they were going to do. Yeah, I knew plenty of guys that love to do that. When you tell somebody what your goals are, it's the I'm going for the state bench record. It's an easy way to get clout and attention and even congratulations before you've done anything, and it costs you absolutely nothing. It's a very effective strategy to farm cheap and easy clout. Those unprincipled and impulsive individuals have to meet reality when it's time to explain to everybody why they haven't done the shit they insisted they were going to do. And when that happens, it's never going to be, oh, I was talking out of my ass. It's always going to be, well, the field of play, it's not really fair. The people over there, they're doing too much. You can't do anything unless you're natural. We can look at the Victorian strongman era up through like the Bronze and the Silver Age before testosterone was ever synthesized. And you have examples of people being muscular, being lean, being strong, having physiques that would be desirable today. No, they were not the genetically elite. That is stupid. There were on the order of 100,000 times less people lifting weights or even having access to a gym back in the day as now. It doesn't matter how good your pan is at sifting mud trying to find that gold nugget. If you're only using one little corner of the river, you're not going to find that gold nugget. You want to find the best genetics. You need the entire world participating like we have now. And what does it mean to do something anyways? Compete at the highest levels of bodybuilding? That's not what the average person needs to concern themselves with. You just need to look good and be relatively strong for the social group you actually live in real life. And you'll find that the standards for that are extraordinarily low. All you need to have an aesthetic physique is to have more muscle than a golden retriever and relatively low body fat. Everybody that lives a sedentary life can gain 10 pounds of muscle just by virtue of doing something. And everybody can diet their body fat down to like 13% or so to where you're relatively lean and you're going to look good. That's the long and short of it. Now, because these goals are easy and attainable, the people that have a basic amount of conscientiousness and are able to plan, commit to goals, see them through, those are the people that get there. So unsurprisingly, the people that go to the black pill are the people that can't. You're going to find the most dysfunctional people, the most low agency, dependent, needy, emotionally volatile people opting for this cope. As the saying goes, how you do the small things is how you do everything. You're not going to find somebody who's using this approach to training who's also like killing it on their prep for the bar exam. Now here, Jeff gives his recommendations of, as a natty guy, a natty advocate, when he thinks it's like acceptable and reasonable.
If they've been lifting for many years naturally, 5 minimum, probably 10 plus is better, especially if they have plans to compete. In fact, I think a lot of people in the industry, they're going to take steroids and then they compete kind of as an afterthought to try to justify it, right? But I think especially if you are competitive or if you're a strongman or something, you're competing in untested federations, like fair enough, you got to do what you got to do. I think that if you are living the lifestyle, your training is super dialed in. If I see you do your working sets and you are all over the place and you clearly don't know anything about programming and you're blasting away, to me that is really hard to justify.
This goes back to my bull riding analogy, or whether you're rock climbing or jumping off a mountain in a squirrel suit. Risky shit requires more investment up front for that risk to make sense. 5 to 10 years natural, high quality lifting, that's almost no one in a typical gym. That is 100% spot on. People that are relatively new or lower level lifters, they don't have the perspective to know how high the turnover is in the gym. Every time you go into the gym, you're dealing with a lot of people that are relatively new, or they're making a comeback, or they're trying to get started again. A small chunk will be people that have chipped away successfully for a long period of time. And this is why I think we need a fucking belt system, because the number of like blue belts and up is going to be very, very small. You're going to look around, it's all white and yellow belts. Competing in an untested sport or competition, that's another reason. But as he points out here, that has to be the goal. You're orienting yourself in order to do that thing because that's what you've decided to commit yourself to. And again, you have to commit seriously. Anybody can go sign up for an amateur meet. $50, $100, depending on where it is. You pay a membership fee and maybe you train well, maybe you don't. You go up, you have a blast the day of. Does that mean that you should blast because it's an untested federation? Probably not a great idea. Like I said, I competed for 6 years. I actually qualified for, went to, and competed at nationals. I think I placed mid-pack. I think I was like 33 out of like 60 people at the time. But I was 20 years old. I had a year and a half of strongman under my belt, and I was just building off of the strength I had built in the gym as an anxious teenager who used that as my emotional escape. But it wasn't until I had competed successfully for several years, I had made progress, I had learned everything I needed to know about the sport, that it became obvious that that was a logical next step where the risk might be worth the reward. And if we're going to say that how serious you take it is part of that equation, your lifestyle and lifting are going to be on point if you take it seriously. So if you have these high goals, again, you're going around telling everybody what you're going to do to get that cheap, easy clout. But if your diet sucks, you're not expanding your knowledge of lifting, you're not aggressively making progress, you're not doing all the things you need to do as if this was your job, how do you justify jumping to the highest risk thing that has the most complexity to it if the easy shit you haven't even taken into account? It doesn't make any sense. And it just goes to show that, again, so many of the people that jump on do so impulsively because they want it now. Go ahead and check out Jeff's channel if you want to see the rest of his list. Go ahead and give him a follow. A lot of good information there from a guy that, whether you want to admit it or not, is natty. So let me know what you think below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.